TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. I'm your friendly neighborhood philosopher, and with me now is your not so friendly neighborhood philosopher, Mike Jones, aka Inspiring Philosophy. How you doing, Mike?
Good. How you doing? Thanks for having
Uh,
me back.
how you doing? How you doing? What have you been reading lately? You
Oh,
seem
a lot
like
of stuff on the.
you seem like a big reader.
Yeah. Well, I got two books here I've been reading on the critiquing the documentary hypothesis,
Huh.
exploring the composition of the Pentateuch, paradigm change in Pentateuchal research. That's what I've been reading a lot lately.
And we are going to go into evidence for the Exodus. This is something I haven't really studied much in the past, so this will be some good information for me as well. Before Mike starts talking, are we roughly even on our audio? I know people were pointing out that I had a problem with I was lower than Robert Spencer last time. I tried to get us about even this time, but does it sound about even? Go ahead and say something about your site IP, but really, it's just for the audio purposes.
Of course. So yeah, I run Inspiring Philosophy. You can check out my YouTube channel, Inspiring Philosophy. Currently working on a three-part series on evidence for the Exodus. Part one and two are out right now. Title is Exodus Rediscovered. The second part is on the wandering period, Exodus Rediscovered Wandering Period. And the third one, which I think is going to be the best and have the most evidence, will be on the Conquest coming out July 8th on my channel.
That sounds like a big old waste of time. Um, All right, so everyone, if you're not following IP's channel, you definitely want to check it out. Link is in the description box. He is. I can't say you're one of the original gangsters of YouTube. When did you start? Because we started in like 2009. What were you like 2013 ish or something like that? 2012.
2011,
Okay,
end
so
of
that is
2011. Yeah.
okay. So that is yeah, and then 2013 or so must have been when I started seeing your stuff.
hmm Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
so
About
now
that.
someone says turn up Mike's volume. What the
All
heck?
right. Let
No,
me try that
that's
then.
not you. I can turn up your volume right in here.
Oh, Craig, go for it.
I will turn you up slightly because everyone else said it's roughly even. Check, check, check.
Okay.
All right. All
Checking.
right, guys, just keep us updated along the way.
hmm
Just know if I catch you lying, if I catch you lying about the audio being uneven, and I realize that you're lying just to annoy me, then I will block you permanently and not like you forever. All right. So the Exodus. What got you into this topic, Mike?
So actually, got me into it was a documentary, Patterns of Evidence. That's what first got me interested in it several years ago. Discovered that Exodus documentary is crap, filled with errors. Then moved to the early date for the Exodus, trying which is where some scholars try to date it, which is around 1446 BCE. Did a whole documentary on it. Then Egyptologist David Falk basically debunked it. You can check out his channel, Ancient Egypt in the Bible. He's got some great stuff. So him and I redid it, arguing for the late date, which is placing the Exodus around 1265 BCE. So I've been studying this for several years, changing my view, trying to follow the data where it leads. And it seems like the most evidence, there's a ton of evidence for the Exodus in the 13th century BC, basically arguing for the date of around 1265 and a conquest about 40 years or so after that.
All right, so you've got your documentary, and I don't know a ton about this topic, so it looks like I'll just hand
Mhm.
it over to you, and you could go wherever you want it. I got some slides and stuff. I got
So
some
yeah,
slides and stuff that you sent, but so you're saying that it is a real event, but with a slightly different timeline than most people would be
yeah.
arguing for.
The reason is just because people go to the Book of Kings and it says that Solomon built the temple 480 years after the Exodus, and they go, okay, well that Solomon builds the temple 966 BC, then you can place the Exodus about 1446 BC. The problem with that logic is that we know from the ancient Near East that temple dedications used idealized numbers. We see this in Egypt, we see this in Assyria, using numbers like 720 or 500 to commonly just sort of give like an idealized number for when the temples were constructed. They're not meant to be taken literal. What we do know is that in ancient Egypt, it says there was a city called P. Ramesses. And the book of Exodus says that the Hebrews built store cities at Pithom and Ramesses. Ramesses didn't exist until the 19th dynasty, so roughly around the time of about 1300 BCE. So that means Israel would still have to have been there to construct parts of the city. So the Egyptologists that believe there was an Exodus believe it happened after the city of P. Ramesses was built. So that places the Exodus about 1265 BCE. And that's where we see the majority of the evidence for the Exodus. We do not see evidence for an Exodus around 1446. I used to think we did, but then I was corrected on that. There is just anything that early day proponents use to try to say an Exodus happened around that date is riddled with problems. We see a ton of evidence around 1265, midway through the Ramesside period for an Exodus. And that to me aligns more with the biblical account because it talks about the city of Ramesses. You can simply take the dates the Bible gives you in its cultural context to realize those are idealized numbers. They're not meant to be taken literal. And we know this from studying the biblical text in its cultural context.
And that that is an interesting issue that keeps coming up, especially in different areas. The idea of literary devices that people used back then that are unfamiliar to us, and therefore we sometimes don't get the point of certain passages because we don't use those literary devices anymore. And
Well, think of here's a good one everyone has to agree with. If you go to Exodus 4, remember it's now if you're going to take the dates literal, that Moses was in Egypt for 40 years, then he was in Midian for 40 years, then he came back to Egypt and he was doing the Exodus and wandering period for 40 years. So he's supposed to be in Midian for 40 years. But if you read Exodus 4:20, it says Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey, and they went back to the land of Egypt. So you're telling me Moses, who got married when he went to Midian, was there for 40 years. He had two adult sons, and he put his two adult sons and his wife on a donkey? Seems unlikely that that would be the case. This is something James Hoffmeyer has brought up. It's more likely that his kids were still relatively young, and this is why they're able to all sit on one donkey. It's not the idea that you have two adult sons riding with their mother on a donkey. Why aren't they with their own families at this point?
all right, so later date. What kind of evidence do you have?
All right, well, let's start with, can you put up the first slide one just so people can sort of see?
I can and I will.
So this is a timeline. It just gives people an idea of when I'm placing the Exodus. You can sort of see this. This is how Egypt is. Actually, put up slide 2. This is the Bronze Age issues, how Canaan is divided. There we go. So this is how Egypt is divided. You have Old Kingdom. That blue area is the first intermediate period, then the Middle Kingdom, second intermediate period, New Kingdom. Exodus is going to happen in the New Kingdom. Most people think Joseph would have been a vizier during the second intermediate period, that little pink area right in there. And so basically around that time, you have Joseph living. Israel, or Jacob, moves his family into Egypt and they settle there. Exodus opens by saying that a new pharaoh arose over Egypt that did not know Joseph. Well, we see there was a dynastic change there. The New Kingdom, or the 18th dynasty, got going. And when they took over, Avaris was the capital of the dynasty in the north, the 15th dynasty, reigning during the second intermediate period. According to the biography of Amos, the General Amos, son of Abana, when they took the city of Avaris, this was a Canaanite city, a lot of Canaanites there. When they took this city, they treated it like a foreign population and enslaved it. So it talks about him taking slaves. We know from archaeological evidence there was no mass exodus at this point. They probably kicked out the rulers of Avaris when the 18th dynasty took over, but the majority of the Canaanite population that was in and around Avaris stayed there, and they were basically serving their new overlords during the New Kingdom. So they're staying there. That correlates with Exodus 1 about a new pharaoh rising and treating the Israelites harshly. Again, no evidence of an exodus at this point. Early day proponents say an exodus happened during the reign of Amenhotep II. I used to think that it did not happen. What B-Tech, Manfred B-Tech, who is leading excavations on the site of Avaris, will tell you is that the site was in use up until about the Ramesside period. And then midway through, the site was abandoned. And the Ramesside dynasty used the site as a graveyard. So around the time of where I have on this timeline of the Exodus, or so around that time, we can't get an exact date or exact year, but Avaris is finally abandoned, and the Canaanite population that was there went somewhere else. We also know at this site there was no evidence of pig bones found, but it was very much a Semitic population, a lot of shepherds that had sheep and goats. B-Tech says they were not from Egypt, they came from the Sinai or further, and they were there until about midway through the Ramesside period. So you can take that down now if you want.
All right.
So generally what we get is Avaris has a Canaanite population. They're treated harshly. They're enslaved. They're there up until about midway through the reign of Ramesses or so, or somewhere in there. And then the site's suddenly abandoned. And after that, the Ramesside population is using the site as a graveyard. The Canaanites or the Semitic people that were there left. They went somewhere else. But that very much aligns with what we would expect if there was an Exodus. They were living at this site called Avaris, which is in the land of Goshen, according to the Bible. This would have been the city that Joseph would have been a vizier in, because this was the capital for the dynasty reigning during the second intermediate period. And so they're there until about Ramesside period, and they leave.
So that's So that's your day. So, by the way, it doesn't seem like anyone's labeling these like clearly like these are the children of Israel and so on. So it's kind of looking for I guess that's why it would be called patterns of evidence in like a documentary, right? So it's not
Yeah.
it's not we have this group here and we know this is who they were and so on. It's here's a group that was there and then they come up missing, so it looks like there was some sort of exodus, and here are some things we can know about this group from when they were there, and this fits well with the Exodus, but not with the traditional dating of the Exodus.
Yeah.
That about
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it correlates. We don't have any inscriptions because, again, this is in the Nile Delta. A papyrus just rotted away. We have scriptoriums that we know were there, and all the papyrus rotted away because this is not the dry climate, the dry areas of Egypt. This is where stuff is going to rot away. So we don't have any direct inscriptions. But we do know there was a Semitic population there that was living there around this temple to Set or Baal, and they were there up until the Ramesside period, and then they left. Correlating with the Exodus. Now that doesn't prove, but it's as you suggest, it's a pattern of evidence that does align with the biblical account.
All right, so is that what you got?
So I got more though, but first I want to bring up a lot of people think the Bible says the Pharaoh drowned in the Red Sea. It actually doesn't. If you read Exodus 14, it talks about how the Pharaoh the army was chasing after the children of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
It says and then it says they followed him to the sea, but it says then their wheels were getting clogged. So it says the chariot wheels were getting clogged, and they said that, and then the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." So there's an indication that the Egyptians started chasing them into the Red Sea, and then they turned and started running. The Bible never says the Pharaoh drowned in the Red Sea. Even super conservative scholars like Douglas Petrovich will admit this. He is like as conservative as you get, like very fringe. He says, yeah, the Bible doesn't say the Pharaoh drowned in the Red Sea. James Hoffmeyer, Kenneth Kitchen, David Falk, they'll all say, yeah, the Bible doesn't say the Pharaoh drowned in the Red Sea, which fits with the data we see from the Ramesside period, because Ramesses II did not drown in the Red Sea. He lived well past the Exodus point and died in his old age. So it's very much the idea that the Egyptians were chasing them. They turned and fled. The waters would have covered a large part of the army, but not all of it. It uses hyperbolic language to talk about the description, but the Pentateuch often uses hyperbolic language. I bring this up for a very important point because I was looking in the Quran lately, and it mentions several verses saying that the Pharaoh drowned in the Red Sea. we don't have any evidence of the Pharaoh ever drowning in the Red Sea. We have no evidence of any Pharaoh ever drowning or dying by drowning in the Red Sea from the New Kingdom. So, which is interesting, though, is what the Bible leaves out, the Pharaoh drowning in the Red Sea, the Quran adds in, and it becomes an error in that sense, because evidence we have from Egypt that any Pharaoh died by drowning in the Red Sea. So the Quran actually has an error here, I would say, by saying in places like Surah 28:40, Surah 17:103, Surah 43:55 that the Pharaoh drowned in the Red Sea. So the Bible, interestingly enough, aligns with the evidence we have from Egypt about Ramesses reigning past, but the Quran says that the Pharaoh should have drowned in the Red Sea.
Did you want to take a look at what the Quran says?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, I'm pulling up the Quran. Alhamdulillah. Let's see here. All right, we have the Quran here. We have 17, Surah 17, verse 103. Let me go with the Shakir translation. So, he desired to destroy them out of the earth, but we drowned him and those with him all together. So, drowned him and those with him. So, that's 17:103. 28:40. I'll go with Shakir again. So we caught hold of him and his hosts. Then we cast them into the sea, and see how was the end of the unjust. So that's Pharaoh cast into the sea. Let's see what else we got. 43:46. And verily we sent Moses with our revelations unto Pharaoh and his chiefs, and he said, I am a messenger of the Lord of the worlds.
Then you get to 55, it then talks about the Pharaoh being drowned after his engagement with Moses.
Let me scroll down through this. So Moses and Pharaoh, Moses and Pharaoh, Moses and Pharaoh, Moses and Pharaoh, down to 55. So when they angered us, we punished them and drowned them every one. When at length they provoked us, we exacted retribution from them, and we drowned them all.
Yeah, and I think it talks about in other places about how the body of the Pharaoh is supposed to be like to show this kind of thing, that he was drowned, like some sort of memory of this. And again, there's no evidence Ramesses, or again, any Pharaoh, even if you take a different date for the Exodus, there's no evidence any Pharaoh ever drowned in the Red Sea.
And it wouldn't... I know you've looked into this, but I remember looking at this because this was a popular argument like back in 2005, 2006, where Muslims would argue that this has been verified, that the Quran verse that talks about Pharaoh being preserved in his body, they were interpreting as God predicting that Pharaoh's body would be preserved as a mummy. And so they're saying that this is the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and it's been confirmed because they have his body. And what I recall looking into back then was, one, didn't seem, there was a lot of criticism on whether that was the correct Pharaoh. Two, the prophecy even is ambiguous. It almost sounds like a contradiction, because what it doesn't say Allah will save your body. It says Allah will preserve you in your body. So it makes it look there like it's contradicting other Quran passages and saying that Pharaoh's actually going to survive. So Allah was going to kill him, but he changes his mind and is going to save him. And then apart from that, the Pharaoh's body that they were pointing to, there's no way that guy was rushing out and going into the Dead Sea, because he had all sorts of, they've examined the mummy, and this dude had all sorts of medical problems and would not have been, put it this way, he didn't die from rushing into the Red Sea.
Right.
He died from massive health problems that had built up over the years and so on. Is the last person that would have been riding around chasing the children of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, and what's interesting is the Bible never says the Pharaoh drowned, and very, very conservative scholars will admit that, but the Quran is very explicit that he did in those passages. So again, what is aligning with the archaeological data here? It's not the Quran, if that's what they mean. So this is actually a problem. But if you want, getting back to the data, we can start talking about the conquest, because this is where a lot of the data really is. There's a lot of interesting data.
One second before we get into that. So the conquest. We have from the goat Mario here. He says Aaron Ra has already debunked all of this. And as you know, Mike, when someone says that something has been debunked, by golly, it's been debunked, and it's not just like that. There are people who will say whenever their guy has responded, they'll say, "Ah, you've been refuted." Because he said something in response to it. And so, do you agree or not? Why are you sharing this when you've already been completely debunked by Aaron Ra?
I would really, really love to see what he's done. I have not seen the video, but good luck, because I'm going to cite data here that just came out within a year or so. Very new stuff. So a lot of, I would highly doubt. I don't think he's anything recently on it, and I highly doubt he has mentioned the data that I'm about to cover.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it up in the air for now as to whether Aaron Ra has debunked all of this. Hey, then we have Black Angel here. It says, whenever I listen to inspiring philosophy, I have the urge to make him a tea with honey.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
That's for your throat.
Yeah.
so you stop sounding like a kid.
Oh yeah, I know. Bad problems. Mike Lacone and I
All
have the
right.
same issue.
What the heck? Hey, we're live, dude. Hello, we're live.
I'm looking for Bukhari.
Bukhari's right there, man. You see how these atheists are, man? You let one of these atheists into your house, and he just comes up and ruins your recording.
What is this anyway? What are you doing there, man?
It's a guy who's like 1,000 times smarter than both of us.
So, I'm an atheist.
Nice.
Why are you not reading my comments, man?
I see your comment right there. I already solved this problem, but I didn't see what you said earlier, so I don't even know what problem you're talking about.
all the problems.
All the problems. All right. Well, that was rude and just shows you the problem with atheists lacking morality.
Mm-hmm.
All right. On to the conquest.
Right. So, let's talk about Jericho, because the moment anyone mentions the conquest, an atheist or a skeptic will immediately bring up Jericho. There is no evidence Jericho was destroyed during Joshua's conquest. So some history here. When John Garstang first excavated the site, he found the destruction there and dated it to around 1400 BC, which made a lot of early date proponents excited. They were like, great, this confirms the early date. Then Kathleen Kenyon went to the site and she said, no, based on dating methods, this destruction happened in 1550 BC. So long before the early date of the Exodus or the late date for the Exodus and conquest, long before that. Early date proponents have tried to say Kenyon is wrong with little success. Scholars like Bryant Wood have tried very hard to argue that that destruction should move to 1400. With little success, the overwhelming majority of archaeologists agree that's a 1550 destruction. But what people don't realize is that John Garstang actually identified two destructions. The early one, which Kenyon dated to 1550, and he says there was a later one. In his book, The Story of Jericho, on pages 123 to 124, he mentions this thing called the Middle Building, which was built on top of the earlier destruction, and it had its own destruction by fire. So there likely was two destructions. Well, we didn't find any really good evidence that there was a second destruction for many decades after this. But we found out why recently, because there was an archaeologist who released his latest reports, Lorenzo Nigro, and he noted that the layers that date to the time of Joshua were cut in by later builders. So occupants from the Iron Age, the Roman, Byzantine periods, they cut into the late Bronze Age layers, removing them. So the reason why we didn't find any evidence of a destruction during the time of Joshua is because of destruction, site leveling from later builders at the site. So what basically happened is the layers that would have revealed if there was or was not a destruction were cut in and removed, and that's why they were not finding this. So it's not that there is evidence. It's not that the layers, the archaeological layers, show that there was no destruction. It's that they were removed, revealing whether or not there was a destruction there. So those are interesting in the latest reports that came out. However, he did say something else that was interesting. He did note that that there was, after the 1550 destruction, and if you want, you can put slide 3 up when I show this timeline. After the 1550 BC destruction, they did rebuild on top of the site with a fortified mud brick structure. The site was there during 1400s, during the 1300s. We can see that there was an occupied structure. Then he says something interesting. He says, Iron Age 1 was detected only in a few places on Spring Hill. Diagnostic ceramic material was dated to the 11th century BC and may be related to a rural village that rose out of the ruins of the late Bronze City. In other words, we see there was a late Bronze fortified structure that was there, and then in the Iron Age, something happened. We don't know because the layers have been cut into. But after that, we see there was just a rural village. So this is in Lorenzo Nigro's latest reports, the Italian-Palestinian expedition to Tel es-Sultan, ancient Jericho, 1997 to 2015. So essentially, the archaeological data does not contradict Joshua's conquest. It doesn't confirm it per se, but at least it aligns with it. Because we've been told for decades now that Jericho debunks the Exodus because it shows there was no destruction there. Well, the latest reports showed us that the reason why we weren't finding a destruction layer was due to site leveling. But we do see there was some sort of change that happened at the end of the Late Bronze Age, which is around the time of the conquest. There was a mud brick fortified structure that seems to have fallen into ruins somehow, and after that, a rural village arose onto the site. So, despite what the skeptics say, Jericho does seem to align with the biblical account. Although more data needs to come out, we need to figure out if we can dig in other areas around the site to find those missing layers that later builders cut into. But that's what the latest evidence shows. It doesn't actually debunk the biblical account. It can align with it quite nicely.
And in random news, it looks like AP needs attention and was upset that he's being ignored while I live stream.
I like his ponytail.
And needs to be, yeah. Is that a man bun? Is that what that's called? What is that? It's like what those dudes who ride bicycle, like those tricycles for adults.
No, I'm trying to be a samurai.
All right. Well, he's dead set on distracting this entire thing. Again, that's what atheists do, right? It's like, oh, you guys are having a discussion about archaeological evidence and so on, so let me just be a distraction. One quick comment here. Bish TV Worldwide says, David, I pray to you to be Muslim. Bish, do not pray to me. Do not pray to me. I know you're used to praying to Muhammad all the time. You guys talk to him directly in your prayers. You say, peace be upon you, O Prophet, as if he can hear you. So I know you're used to praying to Muhammad. Do not pray to me, please. All right. Just had to get that out of the way. All right. So we got IPs dating for the Exodus. We have Jericho. And you're saying it can actually fit.
So what we have, we note that at the beginning of the New Kingdom, the population of Avars was treated harshly and enslaved. They were there until about midway through the Ramesside period when the site was abandoned, turned into a cemetery. And about 40 years or so later, we see there's a change at Jericho. We can't get an exact year, but roughly around that same time period, there is a slight change, at least with Jericho. So we see there's some sort of pattern forming here. Let's also talk about the site of Hazor. Hazor is Joshua is very specific that when they said they attacked the Northern Coalition, the only city they burned was Hazor. All the other cities they took as plunder, according to the book of Joshua. They did not burn rampant through Canaan. Okay, they burned Jericho, Ai, and Hazor. Hazor very much aligns with the biblical account, like very much. Because we do see around this exact time that Hazor was burned by fire. It was definitely burned. Excavations have revealed this over and over again. For example, Amon ben Tor will say a fierce conflagration marked the end of the Canaanite Hazor. Across the site, a thick layer of ashes and charred wood in places 3 feet deep attests to the intensity of the blaze in the northern Galilee city. So there was a fiery destruction of Hazor at this exact same time, dating to sometime between 1250 BC and 1200 BC. So around the time we would expect Joshua to be there. One of the things they find interesting also at this site is that the idols were mutilated in similar fashion to what we see in terms of later Israelite customs of mutilating idols. So the idols at Hazor were mutilated. They were destroyed by the invaders, similar to how the Israelites would mutilate idols in later periods. So Amon Ben Tor again talks about whoever burned the cities also deliberately destroyed statuary in the palace. Among the ashes, we discovered the largest Canaanite statue of a human form ever found in Israel. The head and hands of this statue and of several others were missing, apparently cut off by the city's conquerors. So we have a fiery destruction around the same time of Joshua that's said to be there. And the idols are destroyed in a very similar way to what the Israelite fashion was.
This is going off on a tangent here. But Frank the Christian asks, inspiring philosophy, are man buns pagan?
Absolutely, they're pagan. AP. Man buns are so pagan. You know, I think pagans definitely had hair, and if you have hair, that's pagan. So you got to be careful with that.
So just to be clear, Christmas not pagan, Easter not pagan, man buns pagan.
Absolutely.
All right, You all heard it here.
I'm getting rid of it, man.
So.
Now he's trying on my various props. My goodness, whole show ruined thanks to letting an atheist into my house.
So,
All right. So we've covered 3 issues.
well,
What's next?
There's even more. I mean, there is so much evidence. We're not going to have time to cover it all.
And it's all
But my
fitting.
documentary-
It's all fitting in this general time frame.
It all does, yeah. My documentary coming out on July 8th on the Conquest will cover all of this and more. I have a lot of internal evidence I can use from the book of Joshua to also support the Exodus and Conquest. But archaeologically speaking, we have more sites, like the Mount Ebal site. Joshua was commanded to build an altar to God on Mount Ebal. Well, Adam Zertal, who excavated the site, did find an altar up there. He said a big, large structure that he called an burnt offering altar. There was a ramp leading up to it, and he dated it to around 1225 BCE. Early day proponents now are trying really hard to say that could date to 1400, but I can find nothing in the actual archaeological reports from Zertal or the archaeologists currently there that suggests it could ever be moved that far back. The earliest you can get it is around 1225 BC. It cannot go back any further, but we do have this altar being built on Mount Ebal corresponding to the book of Joshua as well. So we see that was also happening. Also, interestingly enough, the site of Shiloh is resettled at this point. Israel, of course, was at Shiloh in the book of Joshua. They're using the site as a cultic site. We see Israel Finkelstein, who is very skeptical of the Exodus, admits they were there, and he even attributes it to very much to Israelite activity. So to quote from Israel Finkelstein in the Anchor Bible Dictionary, pages 1069 to 1072. The excavation results shed light on several aspects concerning the role of Shiloh in the Israelite settlement process. First, it is now clear that in the beginning of the Iron Age, Shiloh was the outstanding candidate.
What the heck?
To become the...
Sorry.
Stop it, AP.
Sorry, gosh.
I forgot.
It's like a little kid needs attention. We're talking about... My goodness. All right, go where you...
So,
Go ahead.
was the outstanding candidate to become the sacred center of the hill country population. So since it was an ancient cultic site that now stood deserted in an area with only a sparse Canaanite population and a high concentration of Israelite sites. So around the same time as the conquest, we see Shiloh is resettled and is used as a cultic site that has distinct Israelite features at this point. It does not have the distinct Israelite features prior to this. In fact, the Canaanites during the late Bronze Age started to abandon the site and became out of use until beginning of Iron Age, around the same time as the conquest. We see this site is now being resettled. So we have Avaris abandoned about around 1265 BCE. Conquest, about 40 years later, Jericho changes, Hazor is burned, the Mount Ebal site is built, Shiloh is resettled. So we're seeing a pretty clear pattern here. There definitely is some evidence that corresponds to what we read in the Pentateuch in the book of Joshua.
Before we go on, just had one question because you mentioned a documentary that is coming out.
Mm-hmm.
But you have on your channel, you have Exodus Rediscovered. That was posted 3 months ago. You have Exodus Rediscovered, the Wandering Period.
Mm-hmm.
So are these like different installments? Then you have the biblical. Then you had no, that was a live stream. The biblical Exodus, answering objections. Mm-hmm. So what's the are you covering different issues as these are being released, or you are saying I was wrong back then and here's my new view?
No, this is all new stuff. The first one, Exodus Rediscovered, is just the evidence for the Exodus from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
The Wandering Period is about evidence for Israel's time in the desert when they're during their wandering period. And then the final video will be evidence specifically for the conquest. So we're going to start with going over Joshua, the site of Ai, Hazor, Abal, Shiloh, many other aspects as well. So that'll come out on July 8th. And so it's a 3-part series dividing up the Exodus into the 3 stages of their journey.
What about even earlier stuff? So you can go back a year ago to Israel and Egypt, biblical archaeology.
Yeah, that's stuff for evidence of possible correlations for the account of Joseph. Not a lot, because that period of Egypt is very limited and fragmented. We don't have a lot of data from that period, but there are some interesting correlations. I also have a video up on Abraham showing that he likely lived during the Middle Bronze period. Stuff like that as well. So, but the Exodus is where I'm now focusing on, in conquest as well.
All right. The floor is yours, sir, to continue.
All right. So people really want to know. So let's think about this. So as I said earlier, when Avaris was abandoned during the Ramesside period, where did they go? Okay. We cannot prove they went to Canaan. We can only show correlations. But what we do see in Canaan about the beginning of the Iron Age, there is a population explosion that happens. So, for example, William Deaver, who does not believe in an Exodus, he talks about there are new Israelite sites that just pop up. He says the new Israelite settlements are almost all founded de novo, not on the ruins of destroyed late Bronze Age sites, but in sparsely populated hill country extending from Upper and Lower Galilee into the hills of Samaria, Judah, southward, and into the Negev. So we have this huge population increase. Kenneth Kitchen talks about how in some areas we saw roughly a dozen sites in the late Bronze Age. Moving into the Iron Age, we see 131 sites. Or we see in some areas about a dozen sites go up to 200 sites, very dramatically, very drastically. If you want, you can put up the last timeline I have. I think it's slide 4. You can and I just give a rough take of the population change. It's a sudden dramatic change. So,
slight distraction here. Not the obvious one. Not the obvious one. Safraz Hussein says, Devad would accept Islam. I have no idea who Devad Wood is or why he should accept Islam, but Safraz, you got some problems. You got in order to accept Islam, you have to accept the most obvious false prophet in history. I mean, every criterion you could come up with of how a person could show that he's a false prophet, Muhammad meets the criterion more than anyone else in history. I'm not joking when I say most obvious false prophet in history. And then you say, why should we believe in the most obvious false prophet in history? And you guys, your apologists make up stuff. Oh, because of the perfect preservation of the Quran. Well, the Quran ain't been perfectly preserved. What are you even talking about? But the miracles of Muhammad. He didn't perform miracles according to the Quran. But the scientific miracles. You mean the book that says that the sun sets in a muddy pool and you can, go there and there are people who live there and what are you talking about? So I'm sorry. No one is going to accept Islam just because you say that we all need to accept the most obvious false prophet in history. I would believe that this guy's a prophet right here. I would believe that this guy's a prophet before I would believe that Muhammad's a prophet.
I am.
All right. I apologize. We have interruptions coming from every direction now, like literally
They're,
in the room with me. But go
they're
ahead.
perfectly fine. So, can you pull up the chart of slide 4, I think it is?
The chart,
Or the timeline, slide 4.
the. No, wait a minute. Slide 5 is the map. Let's just see what these are. Slide 4 is.
There it
That's
is.
more of
Yep.
your timeline. Okay, that's the one you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you can see. Basically, I'm just giving a rough idea of what sort of happened around. So right around the time of the conquest, there was a huge population explosion in Canaan. So for the book Archaeology of the Land of the Bible by A. Mazar says intense archaeological survey surfaces revealed an entirely new settlement pattern in Iron Age 1. Hundreds of new small sites were inhabited in the mountainous areas of the upper and lower Galilee, in the hills of Samaria, and Ephraim, and in Benjamin, and in the northern Negev, and in parts of central and northern Transjordan. Much of this activity can be related to Israelite tribes. So they're basically saying that roughly around this time, huge population explosion, new sites everywhere. You can put up the next slide if you want, and this comes from William Deaver's book. He again, he's skeptical that these people came from Egypt, but you can see these are all new sites that just sort of are appearing in Canaan around the same time that we would expect Joshua's conquest.
Just to be clear, so these are sites with people that are springing up that people would grant, hey, yes, you're having these spots of growing populations and so on, and it corresponds to the time when you were pointing out another group was leaving, but people wouldn't necessarily say that this is the same group that was leaving Egypt.
Well, yeah, it's weird. It's just the Avaris is abandoned about 40 years earlier, and then about a generation or so later, all these new sites show up in Canaan. Also, Hazor is burned. The Abal site is built. Shiloh is resettled. Jericho has changes. It just seems everything is correlating. And if you want, you can put up the last slide. And this comes from Lawrence Stagger's book. Or not his book, but his chapter in the book.
All right.
So you can see.
This is actually bigger. I can scroll down if there's something you want to see.
No, this comes from the book, The Oxford History of the Biblical World, Lawrence Stagger's chapter, and he shows the changes. You see in the first column, the late Bronze Age. These are the sites in those areas. Very little. All of a sudden, Iron Age. Look, some sites are quadrupling, quintupling, dozens of just new sites, new population. Where did all these people come from? The skeptical response is that this is what Israel Finkelstein and William Deaver will say, is that when the Middle Bronze Age cities collapsed around 1550, these people became nomadic shepherds and stayed in Canaan. They were just sort of there and being archaeologically invisible, and then they became Israel and resettled in the hill country, creating these new sites. That seems ad hoc, a little unlikely. This is just a huge amount of people. And so Kenneth Kitchen, in his book On the Reliability of the Old Testament, responds to them saying this just seems more likely this is about an influx of outsiders coming in. We also know during the Late Bronze Age, Egyptian pharaohs like Tutmosis III, Amenhotep II were depleting Canaan of its population, taking them back to serve as slaves in Egypt. So we know that a lot of people were taken back to Egypt. And what does the Exodus say? It says a mixed multitude went up with Israel. So it could have been a bunch of other Semitic people groups going back to Canaan during the Exodus. But we see this huge population explosion around the time of Joshua's conquest. It's possible that all these new sites come from Canaanites that were living as nomadic shepherds and were entirely invisible, and they just decided to settle, make all these new sites. It just seems far more likely that what's actually happening is an influx of outsiders invading, coming in and making these new sites. And of course, that aligns with the book of Joshua, the Exodus, this idea that there was these people that came in from the outside. And it seems to fit with a pattern we can see of evidence. We see that Avaris was abandoned. That site had no pig bones. 40 years later, all these new sites are popping up. Guess what? None of these new Iron Age 1 sites had pig bones.
And so it's kind of like because you don't have a lot of the direct evidence or inscriptions or sources outside the Bible for a lot of the details. It's like archaeology. Yeah, it's kind of like a mystery and trying to, you know what I mean? Trying to
Well,
like solve the mystery and fit and see what actually fits. And so your point is that actually fits.
Well, yeah, and we do have an inscription that mentions Israel and Canaan at this point. The Merneptah stela that dates to 1208 BC says Israel is in Canaan at this point. So we know they were there present around this time. So if we know they were there, they're already a very likely candidate for the destruction of Hazor, the Ebal site, the Shiloh resettlement, the changes at Jericho. The Merneptah stele directly says they're there in 1208 BC. So they're already known as like a group of people there at that point. We don't ever see them mentioned in any sort of inscription prior to this. So there is no mentioning of them, despite people's misuse of the Berlin stele. There is no mentioning of them prior to this point. They are not there until the first inscription of Israel is 1208 BC in the Merneptah stele, saying they're in Canaan. So we already have Egypt attesting Israel is there. So we don't have to. So why would we come up with alternative explanations to explain why Hazor was destroyed? Changes at Jericho, the Ebal site, the population explosion, when Egypt is already telling us that Israel was there.
I have no idea why so many people from so many directions are trying to distract everything. David Wood, please don't retire. Don't let the Momo circus continue unchallenged. Guys, have you ever heard me say one word about retiring? No. You've heard me say no. Quit reading titles of videos and not paying attention to anything I say in the video and then responding based on the title of a video that you didn't watch. One more here. Rum Runner.
No, God.
Rum Runner.
This is what?
He says, now this is funny because I mean this is a common Muslim response when they're desperate to show that that Jesus was violent too. Notice when you point out that Muhammad had sex with a little girl, they but Mary was young too. They try to turn everyone into pedophiles in order to defend one pedophile. And then when you point out Muhammad called for the violent subjugation of the world and told everyone to go around slaughtering people in his name, then what do? And instead of defending him, they try to make Jesus sound the same. And this is one of the main ones. But the guy's channel's name is Rum Runner. And it's not an Islamic channel. So I don't know if this guy absorbed the same stupid arguments and so on. I hate to do this, IP, but I do love exposing a lot of nonsense. So let me just scan this real quick, take a quick look at the passage here. So what our friend Rum Runner is pointing out is, yeah, if you go right down here and you ignore all the rest of the whole passage, but as for these enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me. You see there? That's Jesus saying, but as for these enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me. You see, it's Jesus telling his followers to go on a killing spree. But now I'm confused. Why didn't Peter and John and James, why didn't they go on a killing spree right after Jesus commanded them this? Oh, because it's a story. Now look,
it's a parable.
Now look, we just go back. Look what happens when we actually read things in context. Here we go to verse 11. As they heard these things, he proceeded to tell a parable because he was near to Jerusalem. Look at verse 12. He said, therefore, a nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and then return. Calling 10 of his servants, he gave them 10 minas and said to them, engage in business until I come. And then so he leaves. He eventually comes back, finds out that some people have rebelled against them. And then the king, the nobleman in this story, at the end of it says, but as for these enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me. So following this logic, since I just read this story, you could quote me and say, but here's David saying, but as for these enemies of mine who do not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me, because I said it while telling a story. Mm-hmm. This is just amazing stuff, man. This is amazing stuff. You can literally be telling a story and say, hey, this character in my story says this, and then you see, you said it. And what's funny is like, you expect like stupid people to use this, right? Because I mean, you actually have to be, you have to be stupid or very poorly informed or deceptive. Those are the options if you're using this. But keep in mind, people like Ahmed Deedat and Zakir Naik are the ones who use this and popularize it, right? So these are Islam's most popular apologists, completely distorting and misrepresenting the words of Jesus in order to deflect attention from Muhammad. What a religion, man! What a religion! All right.
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
it's whataboutism. It's whataboutism. It doesn't actually make us like Muhammad anymore. It just reminds us, oh yeah, he's a bad guy. You keep comparing him to all these bad things you think happened. Like that doesn't help.
And it's funny. I mean, like, so you have whataboutism when it's correct, right? You say, but what about this other thing that is correct? When it's Muhammad ordering his followers to violently subjugate the world, and you say, but what about Jesus saying right? And he doesn't say it. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl, but what about Joseph and Mary? And then it's wrong. And then my goodness, what a religion, man. What a religion. All right, back to you.
So briefly cover what we kind of got here. So again, this is only scratching the surface. I'm going to go through 19 archaeological data points in the full 3-part series that I'll cover on the conquest, plus over roughly 30 points of internal evidence confirming the Exodus conquest. But what we argue here tonight is that we can see that the population of Avaris, which was in what the Bible calls the land of Goshen, was enslaved after a dynasty change. They were there till about the Ramesside period. Their site had no evidence of pig bones. The site was abandoned around the time of Ramesses. About a generation or so later in Canaan, there's a change at Jericho. The Abal site has been settled. Shiloh has been resettled. Hazor is destroyed. We see a population explosion. And Egypt admits in the Merneptah Stele Israel is present there in Canaan. My question is this: why posit a different theory for Israel's origin than what they're telling us in their own ancient texts, when so much evidence is already aligning as it is? Why are we going to posit that, oh no, there was no Exodus, they just made it up? Because now you got to explain why they would make up the book of the Exodus and come up with alternative explanations for why Hazor was burned or why this population explosion has happened. You're multiplying entities beyond necessity. It seems we can explain this pattern of evidence we have found with an Exodus account, which is what Israel told us. We don't have to come up with different explanations here. So it just seems it's like a simpler explanation. And none of this would actually prove God exists. It does support the biblical reliability, but you could have and believe there was an Exodus account. Like it doesn't, I don't see why would you want to even just reject that entirely. It seems entirely fair. You could have, this could all just have been a natural event and people interpret it as God's will, as God acting, but it can still confirm an Exodus account. I don't see why skeptics go so far as to deny the Exodus.
Yeah, there is if there was just absolutely nothing that fit and so on. And so if you just had the Bible and it was the Bible versus everything else, then obviously if you don't take the Bible as an authoritative source and it's going against everything else, then you'd see the problem and not want to take it seriously. But there is this issue, and same thing with the New Testament, of people not wanting to treat the Bible as any kind of source at all, which seems insane to me, right? You've got grades here. So you've got inspired, inerrant word of God, and then you go all the way down to, okay, these are some ancient documents written by people who weren't inspired. Well, I don't believe the Quran was inspired. I still believe you can learn all sorts of stuff about the beliefs of the people at the time and learn all kinds of things about what was going on because it's an old source. And so it is just weird, right? That historians will find all of these details that line up, that match up with Jesus. But you'll have people that, if the Bible is your source about something, then even if all the stuff we know historically fits with the biblical picture of Jesus, there are people out there who won't count the Bible as any kind of source at all. And so looks like we have something similar with the Exodus. So the question you asked was, why are you not, if you've got all these details and they fit with this picture, and then you've got this book which is tying everything together and telling you how this happened, why is that just being automatically discounted and saying this has nothing to do with our picture? Here are the things that we know from outside the Bible.
Wait, did you say you have grapes?
You trying to, man, eat some grapes, dude. What the heck?
Sorry.
So I also want to add that I'm not coming up with this stuff on my own. I'm getting this from experts, Egyptologists. So my three-part documentary series, including part three that's coming out on July 8th, Egyptologist David Falk helped extensively with this. You can check out his channel on YouTube, Ancient Egypt and the Bible. He's got a lot of good stuff there, but he's helped extensively with this. So I've been working with experts. Scholars like Joshua Berman and Mark Chavalas have reviewed these and offered criticisms and changes for me to make, as well as Benjamin Noonan, another biblical scholar. So I'm trying to work with scholars here on this. This is not just me coming up with this stuff on my own. Okay, I'm not that special. I'm getting this from the experts themselves, Egyptologists, biblical scholars. All the evidence points to an Exodus and conquest at this time. There is a lot of evidence pointing there. So we have enough, I would say we have more than enough to confirm an Exodus, just from what I've given you tonight. And this is only scratching the surface. I have so much more data to cover on July
8th. So that is, it's funny. I was about to say, hey, give me the links to your ongoing series, and so I can add that to the description box or add it as a pinned comment. And then I was going to say, hey, and I'll go ahead and link to your to your one in July. And I was like, wait a minute, this channel's deleted July 4th. So that's not going to work. So, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to subscribe to IP's channel so you can get that. If you're clicking on this right now, it's probably a topic you're interested in. So definitely subscribe to his channel. You could check out some of his other videos on this topic that he's made so far. And then you said July 8th for the new one?
Yeah, July 8th will be the conquest one. Then I'll probably do another hangout with David Falk. And we'll deal with objections from skeptics against the Exodus. So we'll cover some of that stuff there as well. But yeah, July 8th is the date for the final one, and that's going to have the most evidence in my view.
All right. Well, so they got your views going through the timeline here and nowhere to get more. Any final thoughts before I shut down and beat the crap out of this apostate behind me for...
Well, you can also just remember, all of this data also helps support the unreliability of the Quran, because again, they say the Exodus Pharaoh drowned in the Red Sea. James Hoffmeyer, Kenneth Ketchin, even ultra-conservative scholars like Douglas Petrovich will say the Bible never says that. The archaeological record does not indicate any New Kingdom pharaohs ever drowned in the Red Sea. So this is a problem for the Quran, but it's not a problem for the Bible. The Bible fits with the archaeological data quite well.
Interesting stuff. All right, so yep, we will definitely all be checking that out, and I have this amazing inclination to tell people to come back for the link when this channel's not going to be here. It's so funny. All right, so ladies and gentlemen. If you're not familiar, I mean, you've been on with me several times right now. I want to say, hey, if you don't know if you're not following Inspiring Philosophy, then, I mean, it's kind of your fault, right? It's like, it's not like there are new channels. There are new channels and stuff where I would say, hey, make sure you follow this guy's channel because he's new and you don't know him. But if they don't know you by now, there's something just wrong with him. So if there's anyone out there who's not following Inspiring Philosophy, definitely check that out. He is going into some great depth on a lot of topics that are very relevant to Christians and to critics of Christianity. So definitely check out that channel.
Who's that guy again? Is he a YouTuber? Okay.
My goodness, man. Everyone stop right now. Sorry, Inspiring Philosophy, Mike Jones. Stop for a second. Everyone just give the apostate prophet attention here, because he obviously needs attention. Okay, just wait.
He should be your hype man. Be back there like beatboxing or
Yeah.
hyping you up like, oh, snap.
That's what that would be cool. We should do a live stream one day where we bring hype men, hype guys, and like everything we say, someone's in the background. Oh! That would be like a Muslim debater's like dream fantasy, to be doing an online debate like this, but have a whole crowd behind him to shout that he's making great points. It helps to cover up the bad points. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Mike Jones. And everyone follow the channel. And don't worry, when the documentary comes out next month, we'll find a way to get it to you if this channel happens to be destroyed on the 4th, which it will. All right, catch y'all later.
Like, can I ask a question quickly?
What?
I want to ask IP a question before you leave.
Yeah, go ahead. Hurry up.
Is it true that IP is never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around?
You don't even know the words, man.
Yeah, I forgot. I don't know.
Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. I don't know the words either. Hurt you. He just rickrolled everyone.
Very disappointed in both of you.
He just rickrolled everyone. All right. No more rickrolling. Catch y'all later.